an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood. Episode 50. Dun, da, da, da. Silver? Is this a silver anniversary? Ed can get some new silver automail to celebrate. In this episode, Pride is taken off the board, but unfortunately, in order to do that, we also have to remove Al. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. Hey, what's up, Max? If you're out there, how are you doing, bruh? I can't get over the fact, guys, that we are about to enter into the promised day, and there are still 14 episodes after this. I don't know what to make of it, because it could be that all 14 episodes happen in the promised day. It could be that only some of them do, and then some shit continues to happen after, which just feels like insult to injury, really. Like, we all accepted that the bad things were going to happen on this one day, and if you make them happen beyond that one day, you're sort of overstaying your welcome as a villain, and you should really consider how you could be a little bit more polite to your victims. Or 13 episodes take place at the promised day, and then the very final episode is like, oh, we're going to give you guys a little bit of a wrap-up. We could jump ahead in time. 14 episodes, that's a lot. I mean, these all move at such a clip that, considering everything that they can pack into 20 minutes, we could be God knows where. It's beyond really me being able to even predict. And I find that really interesting, because I truly thought I had a grip on how the pacing of this was going to work. And apparently not so. I'm fine with that. I really am. I like being surprised. So I'm just saying, truly can't imagine how this is going to be handled. So we start this episode in the midst of the fight between Pride and Ed. I have got to say, Pride is probably one of the better villains I have seen, period. His abilities are so creepy. The voice actor for him is very good. The animation for him is excellent. It's both the animation of him as a child and the way that they managed to jump from him looking like an actual helpless child to him looking like the spawn of Satan. And it's also the animation of what his powers can do, which is really cool and creepy. There's just a lot about how Pride works and how he was revealed and how long that took that I think is extremely well done. And there's a part of me that's almost a little sad that he was taken off the board the way that he has been, but I'm also not certain it's going to hold. It seems like a really good plan. Once we get there, I'll talk about the way that's been set up, and it sounds like it would work. However, anything sounds good, and then you add something else into the mix that I never thought of, or another person shows up, or God knows, and anything can happen. But as it stands now, if he isn't part of the fight coming up, it's just, he's so spectacular to watch, and what he can do is so wild, and he has such a very particular kryptonite that often when you find out there's one weakness that a character or a villain has, it can be frustrating because it feels almost like a cheat. But with Pride, the fact that darkness is what he is, and it is also the thing that can disable him completely, I find that fascinating, and complete darkness being the only thing that can, like, cause him defeat. And it's also something that would, for most fighters, be an impossible option. He would not be able to do, most people would not be able to fight an opponent in complete pitch black darkness. This is one of the most compelling and frustrating kryptonites I have ever seen. And again, just going back to what I said last episode with how I definitely thought that he was luring over those guys because he wanted to, get Darius in trouble, and because I wasn't seeing the big picture and that he just wanted their lanterns, it makes it so easy to trick me because I'm not used to the kinds of fighting that he's doing. And it just, I have to think in a different way. And I always find that really, really fun, because when you keep facing the same kinds of threats over and over again in media, you get a little bit blasé about a lot of it. And even if their kryptonite is something that's like really rare or whatever, it tends to just be accepted. Yeah, it's super rare. They'll definitely find it though. They'll find it and they'll use it and it will be fine. And there's something about this that I'm like, darkness is how do you maintain that forever and accomplish what you need to? Like, if you want to take Pride out, you'd have to make a sort of darkness airlock, a light lock, I guess, so that, like, for this, they wind up imprisoned in this giant sort of like onion, is what I kept thinking of it as. You'd have to attach another smaller onion, create an opening between both so you can pass between them, and then an opening from the smaller onion to the outside. So you step into the middle onion, close the door behind you, and then you step into the bigger one. But the issue is, you are stepping in and you cannot see, and Pride can come at you or jump you or whatever because you're coming in a particular entrance that's very easy for him. He's a kid. Without his power, I don't know how much damage he could do, but I feel like he could think of something. It's just a very tricky kind of power, and I am so into it. So anyway, so yeah, we start off with him in the midst of the fight with Ed still. And he has this like jaws thing that he slams it down on a tree trunk and the tree falls forward onto Ed. It did feel a little bit like you could have eaten up Ed, but he doesn't want to damage him that much. He could have taken arm off, I guess, but he's not going that far. And what we get from here is pretty much a series of escapes and jumps into trees, getting chased out of the trees getting chopped down, sort of chomped. Lanfan finally realizes that Greed is the one that's in charge of Ling's body, and she says something about how he should give the body back, and Greed doesn't even say anything like, Ling went into this willingly. He just says, why would I do that? Which feels like a very Greed response. He's not going to try and be reasonable with her or explain. He's just going to be like, I'm not doing what you tell me. Fuck off. And that makes complete sense to me. And then we have the Lanfan and Ed conversation. She gets like dropped from a tree almost into the jaws of Pride's little weird tentacle monster. And Ed saves her. And then she tries to say, I didn't ask for your help. Look, I think everybody needs to agree. when you're in the midst of fighting a fucking homunculus with shadow powers and somebody saves your life, that is not the fucking time to get an attitude with them. Shut the fuck up, Lanfan, and accept that he saved your life and be gracious and stop it, you proud bitch. Knock it off. But, of course, this is a mechanism to get to the moment where Ed is like, I know you're not ready to fight yet. I can tell that shit is still bothering you. And if you want to take care of yourself, you have to prove that you fucking can. Because you just nearly died. So I don't know what to tell you if you weren't asking for my help. And I just decided, oh, she didn't ask. You would be crushed in half. Maybe be better at this part of the job. And I was like, that is harsh but fair. 100%. So then we go to Greed taking on Pride one-on-one as the lion guy, whose name I will never remember, you guys. Is he Lionel? Is it like something really lion-y sounding and I'm forgetting? But he goes off with Fu, is his name, right? I'm so bad with these names, you guys. I'm so sorry. But anyway, he is telling Pride, or he's telling Greed, hey man, I'm really sorry I couldn't kill that little asshole when I got the chance. And Pride is like, man, look, killing him is really hard. I am not mad at you for that. I can't fault you for it at all. And Greed is still standing there with those weird, like, violet-looking eyes and that little smirk on his face. And then all of a sudden, we cut into this weird light moment, and I thought it was going to be Al in the void, that he was, like, going back to where his body was. It, of course, is not that simple. We can't have him just, like, accidentally travel back to his body. He's coming back to consciousness as his father kind of shakes him and wakes him up. And he says about the fact that Pride took control of him, that he feels really violated, which I really appreciated the show using that word, because I don't think a lot of times in fiction, the concept of being like mind controlled or possessed isn't given the gravity that I think something like that deserves. And like one of the prime examples of this is Harry Potter, where we have like moments where we step back and really look at the fact that like the Imperious Curse is super fucked up, or, you know, memory erasing is like can be really misused. But they also do use memory erasing and memory charms a whole lot on Muggles, and it's meant to explain why people don't know about stuff, but it also comes across as like pretty problematic. And there's so many more examples of just moments where somebody's free will is overridden, their entire body is hijacked and taken from them. And then they kind of like undo whatever it was that happened, and that person is just angry in a general way, as if they got punched. But it doesn't often feel to me like they have the kind of trauma that one would have after being in such a completely powerless position. And I just really liked the fact that Al not only like admits to feeling this, but he says it out loud to his father, because we have a lot with Alphonse of his internal monologue. So it isn't out of the question that they might have just had him thinking to himself how much that fucked him up. And instead, he's like open with his dad about it. And he, unfortunately, there's this awful moment where he says, all of this is my fault. If I hadn't let Pride catch me, none of this would have happened. And later on, he says that this is all my fault to Ed. And Ed doesn't contradict him. And they were in the middle of like a big thing. Ed's preoccupied. They're making a split-second decision. I understand that this isn't really the time to stop and argue about it, but I just hated that nobody contradicted him on this. Because you didn't know what pride even was, man. The fact that you got caught is not your fault. And I hate to see you blaming yourself like this. It's really unfair to you. You know what I mean? I just felt so... I just had so much sympathy for him, and I wanted to just kind of slap him and be like, if you could go back to that moment, still not knowing what pride was, but you were warned something was coming for you, what could you possibly have done? And even if you did know what pride was, what could you possibly have done? He was just in a situation that I'm not sure there would have been a way out of if he were better prepared even. So anyway, you guys know, I love Al, and he's just such a sweet pie, and I hate that he ever is hard on himself because he has been through it. It's bad. It's already very bad. We don't need to be adding to his burden. Kid doesn't have a fucking body. He doesn't have a fucking mom. That should be enough, you know? So, anyway. Oh, Heinkel. Thank you. Be more. They come out of the woods with Fu. And Fu goes up to talk to Hohenheim. And is like, so, you're Ed's father. And he brings him up to speed about what Pride's doing. The fact that he, consumed gluttony. That Greed and Ed are the last ones fighting him, and he doesn't know how long they can last. And he also explains about the fire and the fact that there's no way to get him in the dark at this point. And this is when Al says, okay, Dad, you're a pretty brilliant alchemist, right? And Al and his father says, well, he's trying to be humble. I don't really know why. Look, dude, we all know that you're very into yourself, or you wouldn't have behaved the way you have. But he does the whole, well, I might know a thing or two. And Al is like, all right, well, I have an idea, and I need you to be the linchpin for this. I have to have your help. So what we do, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, is Hohenheim, because he has this very strong signature feel to him, he walks up to Pride, and Pride can sense him in the distance, and immediately sort of stops what he's doing because he is low-key about to kill Lanfan. He really has her. And Greed is in the midst of being he asks Ed, are you okay? And Pride points out, wow, you're asking how other people are doing? You've really gotten quite soft, sir. This is honestly a little bit pathetic. To which Ling says, shut up, you beast. I feel like you could do better than that. Come on, Greed. Beast? Get out the Ulthosaurus, my friend. You could do better than that. And Pride just responds with, wow, if you keep being rude to me like that, I may just have to eat you. And Greed just says, I won't go down easy, brother. He doesn't even say, I'd like to see you try. It's not even about, I don't think you could beat me. Because I don't think Greed even means that. He's just like, I will fight every step of the way that I always have. You know how I am. I'm not going to be any different with you. So this is when Pride closes his eyes like he's about to start something with Greed. And then he stops and sniffs the air and gets completely distracted by the fact that Hohenheim is walking up. And he really falls for this, like, distraction. But he has such power that it doesn't work on him as, like, completely effectively as it might have worked on a human. But it turns out that doesn't really matter, because the distraction isn't what he thought it was. So Hohenheim walks out, says the hero always waits until the last second to make his move. Okay, Hohenheim, I guess you could just say whatever. That's fine. Hero. And Pride says, okay, you think that you can defeat me? And Hohenheim just says, no, I'm also not dumb enough to try and fight you. And Pride is intrigued by that. Doesn't attack still. And is sort of like, the fact that he just walked out here and straight up said, I would never fight you, means that he's got some shit up his sleeve. He certainly has a plan. And I don't like it, because I can't figure out what it is, and he seems extremely confident. And as he is trying to, like, figure out what that could be, his shadows retract from the area where Lanfan is. Like, it's sort of like he can't split his consciousness enough at the moment to continue to attack her, because he is so distracted about what Hohenheim could be up to that he has to pull his concentration completely onto Hohenheim. And so the shadows have to follow where his concentration has gone. And again, I don't, anytime I say shit like this, it's just what I'm getting as an impression, but I don't have evidence to support it. So just know that. B. Moore says, I interpreted that differently. This is the first time Al joined the fight. It was misdirection, but Hohenheim was calling Al the hero here. Oh. I didn't even think about that, because I just don't like Hohenheim. It's my bigotry. Sorry, guys. I try not to let that influence me in life, but it does. It happens. Thank you, B. Moore. But that makes more sense. Because him calling himself a hero, as much as I don't like the guy, it did not seem on brand for him. So that makes a lot more sense. So he brings his focus all to Hohenheim, who begins to walk forward. And I love Pride just saying, here he comes. But Al comes running up behind him. And Pride grabs Al without even turning around, and says, that's it? That was your pathetic plan? And I was very confident that this wasn't his plan. I was pretty much like, that's not actually the thing. But I didn't know what the thing was, so I really was kind of nervous for a second here. I don't think Al's going to die, but I do think that we could have something pretty dramatic happen to him. And it would still be awful. And you don't have to kill him for me to be upset about it. So he's got Al completely wrapped up and, like, brings him to his knees. And his helmet falls off even. And Ed comes running up saying, Al, no, trying to help. And Hohenheim puts an arm out and holds him back. And Ed is watching his dad, because earlier Pride said something about, like, do you think that your father would come help you if I cut a few limbs off? Like, would he even give a shit? Which we know that he would, because we've been told in a variety of ways that he would. And I believe truly that he would. But also, if I'm Ed and all I have is the evidence of how my dad has behaved towards me so far, I absolutely would never think he would come for me. I just wouldn't. His father has not really demonstrated any, like, genuine affection in a way that feels significant to me. He has just brought them up to speed on what he is and what happened. And that's really not quite enough. So just saying, there are times where a villain will try and like taunt somebody into losing faith in their partner or their parent or guardian or whatever. And sometimes that taunting comes with like a revelation. And the villain is like, oh, you didn't know that, huh? And it's understandable how it undermines things. Sometimes it feels really contrived. And you're like, come on, man, you know that she's loyal to you. You don't need to even think about this. What are you doing? We've just watched an hour and a half of her having your back. And you're just getting irritated with the fact that the hero is falling for this. And this, he pokes at an actual insecurity, you know? It feels so effective because it is something that, like, if you had asked me how much Hohenheim seemed to give a shit about his kids when I was operating with the information I had from episodes 1 through 20, for example, I would not expect him to put himself on the line for his son. Unless it was, honestly, to, like, increase his reputation somehow, because he felt vain to me. But regardless, this moment where Ed is looking up at his dad and he genuinely doesn't know what his dad is doing because holding him back, he feels a way about it. Like, there's a sense of you're just going to stand there and watch and not do anything, which to Ed would look like exactly what the fuck Pride said would happen is happening. And it's Al instead. And then Pride says something about how, like, is your son just really fucking stupid to let himself get in the position where he's being held hostage? Because it's actually sad. And then Hohenheim says, you've crossed a line. Don't mock my son. And he begins to assemble the giant onion, which comes up around Pride quickly enough that he can't get out. And this was one of those things that for a moment I was like, he should have been able to get out of there in time. But Pride, again, I keep forgetting. He doesn't just, like, he isn't dematerializing and becoming Shadow. The shadows stretch out from him, but he is stuck in his body. So he can't just, like, turn into Shadow and dart out of there. He has to carry his little human body out of there physically. And the ground starts rumbling, and he doesn't even know what's happening yet. So why would you immediately start to run when you're a creature of his power? A little bit of an earthquake and a feeling of somebody doing some alchemy is not going to make you just turn around and run. And so it begins to, like, lift these petals up around him. And once he finally starts to figure out what it is Hohenheim is doing, he is like, what the fuck? And he launches a spear of darkness out through the crack between two of those pieces. And it just barely, like, reaches Hohenheim. It's a real, like, I think I've made this comparison before. Tom Cruise in that Mission Impossible movie where the helicopter propeller spins and, like, almost reaches his throat. However, because it closes before, like, it quite reaches him, the onion closes completely and locks Pride in the dark. That piece of Shadow is separated from Pride, which means that it just dissolves in a pretty good moment of, like, oh shit. So then we wind up inside the onion with Al talking to Pride. And there's, like, a series of interesting conversations in there. I will jump back to that in a moment. First, we go to Greed, who is delighted in the fact that Pride has been taken down. And he, like, turns and runs off. Ed, meanwhile, begins to yell at his father, How could you do something like that? Al is trapped in there with that monster. And Hohenheim is like, I didn't just go ahead and do this. This was Al's entire plan. This was his whole idea. He knows what's at stake, and he is willing to do what he has to do to ensure that we have the best chance we have at saving everybody, because he understands what's on the line. So Ed sort of winds up having to step back and appreciate that this was his brother's choice. But like myself, Ed feels a little bit bigoted towards his father as well because of the way he's been treated. And you can tell that there's some suspicion still. There's just kind of an overall sense of like, all right, I guess. But he doesn't fully trust his dad, understandably. So then we go to Al inside, and Pride is like, I don't know why you're so fucking pleased with yourself, because you are also stuck in here, may I remind you. And Al is like, okay, you're not really thinking about this in the way that you should. I am in a body that does not need food or water or air or any of that. I am perfectly comfortable. And I could just sit here, exactly here, and not move for days, and it would be fine. I don't know how you can survive. And that's an interesting question, because he is a homunculi, but they have gone to great lengths to say that they are also kind of human. So I don't know if that means that they are really hungry, like they get hungry as well. Like we saw Pride, or we saw Greed, and he was eating, but he was in Ling's body, so it's not really the same. He wasn't formed in the same way. Gluttony ate, but that was his entire identity, so that's a really different situation. I'm assuming that they, even if they can eat, I've been sort of assuming it's not totally necessary for them. But I don't actually know that to be true. So, just curious. But anyway, he basically says it to Pride, I am just going to chill in here until after the promised day, and neither of us are going to get out. Because Pride has tried to be like, well, as soon as you try to get out, light will be let in, and then I'll be able to do what I want. And Al is like, yeah, about that. Don't need to worry. So back outside, Hohenheim and Ed are finishing their conversation, and Ed tries to do the whole, well, you could have told me. And Hohenheim's like, yeah, he anticipated that as well, and he told me not to tell you, because he knew that you would object to it, and it was the only plan that he could come up with where everybody would survive and the slum would be safe and everything. And Ed has a moment where he just stands there and glowers. And Hohenheim walks away saying, all right, let's put these fires out. But Ed can't just walk away. So he goes up to the side of the onion and is yelling through it and just saying, man, this isn't much of a reunion. And this is the part where Al says it's my fault. I only have to stay in here for one day. I promise I'll be okay. And obviously, Ed is very frustrated, but he also finally seems to recognize that this plan is the best they're going to do in the circumstances. So then we go to Greed, and he is running, thinking about everybody who has been taken off the board. Lust is gone. Envy is gone. Gluttony is gone. Wrath is at Eastern Command. So he thinks. We don't know where Wrath is really, but that's what he's going with. And they've got Pride under lockdown. He thinks that the only one that he's going to need to deal with is Sloth and Pops, as he calls him, which I do find endlessly funny. Pops. It does not suit him at all, and that's why I love it so much. From inside his head, Ling asks Greed, what the hell are you planning? And Greed says, man, I fucking told you, I want to rule the whole world. I feel like I was very upfront about that. I don't know why you've forgotten about it, but it's still very much my plan and in play. I am looking forward deeply to seeing what Ling decides to do about greed and how that's going to go. Super interested. So then we go to this group of men who are out in the slums, and they're talking about all the Ishvalans that people have been spotting lately. That they are in the west of town, wondering what they're all doing here, what they're planning. One of them is like, hey, what happened to that fellow with the X-shaped scar across his face? And just as he says that, they all walk up. And one of them is like, oh, hey, did that girl reconnoiter with you, basically? Has she found you? And describes May, and they're like, wait, what? And it becomes very clear that she did not follow the plan as they had set it out for her. She just is doing her own fucking thing. And I really, I'm just so deeply frustrated by that I'm not really even going to get into it, because I feel like I said everything I need to say about it. But they just genuinely don't know what it is she could be doing. So one of these guys who was like sort of off screen comes running up and asks, are you celebrating tonight? And he thinks Scar is the one that blew up Bradley's train. But he can see from Scar's reaction that's not actually how it went. And he says, I just assumed you must have led the other Ishvalans to take your revenge on King Bradley. And one of them says, all that stuff about them being terrorists is nothing but paranoid nonsense. So there's been a bunch of propaganda circulating about the Ishvalans, which makes a ton of sense, but we haven't really seen that being put into play. I would have liked to see that aspect of it a little bit more. I always find the concept of crowd control during the kinds of things that are going on here to be sort of compelling, because you have got these high-powered main characters, and then you just have random regular people who are watching this all happening, living through it. And as much power as these guys have, if everybody decided that they were going to do something as one, they could probably make a dent. So you have to know why exactly they are being convinced that they can't do that. Because that's what it's all about. If you're trying to maintain control of a people, and you do not care about their welfare, it is solely about maintaining control, you have to find an enemy for them to focus on and to redirect all of that energy so that they can't come at you, which has been the entire plan behind making poor people fight each other and not actually address the huge amount of exploitation that's actually happening. So I would like to see more of that. It's the kind of thing that I don't know exactly how one would do it elegantly. If this were a book, you could just go to a sort of interlude with a character every few chapters and get a look. And you could do that with an episode on this show, I guess. But because the show's pacing is so quick, I feel like it wouldn't really fit as well. But it is something that I'm personally always interested in, is the logistics of handling people and the circulation of incorrect information and how effective that is. And I could say I probably have more interest in this now than I might have at one point, because it's obviously been kind of a fucking thing happening in our country for hundreds of years, literally hundreds of years. So anyway, the response from Scar is, my brothers would never lower themselves to such cowardice. They're your allies, and this country will soon see them as heroes, not terrorists. And as he says this was truly such a bummer. as he says this, the camera pans into this alley, and it's like a secret hideout building that's like sort of empty, and all of these Ishvalans are dead already, and Kimberly is just leaving. You guys, this really, truly bummed me out so bad. I think it's the combo of the fact that Scar is so clueless. And so he's speaking with this complete confidence and respect about men who, I don't know if this is supposed to be that all of them were wiped out, but it was certainly like a good size number. The fact that he is so confident and respectful, and we know how they've been taken down. It's the fact that it's Kimberly, for me, because he's such a bastard. It's the fact that he is talking, like when Scar is saying, you guys will see them for the heroes they are. No, nobody will. That they're getting robbed of that opportunity in a way that's just cruel. And that also for me was just like not getting the vindication in the end after everything that they went through. That is a tough pill to swallow. And then overall, the Ishvalans have been fucking put through it already. And for them to get this second, like, devastating wipeout moment, it's just unfair. Like, man, you know? I just hated this. This sucked so bad. And Kimberly, for his part, says something about how he really needs to learn how to, like, keep it in hand with his job. And from the way he's saying this, it almost sounds like what he's saying is, I killed too many people. I shouldn't have gone this far. But pretty quickly, he follows it up with, I spent a fortune having the suit tailor-made, and now it's filthy. This is like that moment where you thought Wrath was shaking from grief, but it turns out that he's trying really hard not to slap a child in the face. Just like brutal. Brutal. And look, I've been saying, and I stand by, that Kimberly is this signal on how much he is in control is whether or not he has his hat. And he has his hat in this moment. He's putting it back on as he lifts the candle and blows it out. And I was just like, somebody just take his hat off and put an end to this fucking guy. So then we cut back to the inside of the onion. And Pride is digging at the wall with a stick. And Al is like, oh my God, come on, man. You have to know. He would not have made the wall thin enough that a child could dig their way out. You really don't have any fucking respect for us, do you? You think he would do something like that because you just underestimate us all as a group. And it's the thing that's going to undo you because you're so arrogant that you're not considering the ways in which we could outsmart you or work together. And then accuses Pride of having a sloppy plan overall. And he says the plan needed us as your sacrifices, but we could have just not done the things that you wanted. We could have just fled to another country. And just doing that would mean that your entire plan would fall apart. I was expecting for Pride to be like, another country? You think we can't just follow you and track you down in another country? Because honestly, that's how I was interpreting this. I would not consider fleeing to another country to be the solution. I feel like that seems pretty much just a matter of time. It wouldn't change anything. It would just draw it out. And I guess if everything depends on like this eclipse that's coming, maybe if they had managed to draw it out long enough, they couldn't have done it on the day that they were planning, and that would have had an effect. So maybe it would have, but I was just surprised that Pride doesn't actually address that part of it at all. What he focuses on is the character of the boys. And basically is like, look, I may underestimate human beings. I may not give you the credit you deserve on some things. But the one thing that we were pretty sure about was what you and Ed would do if you knew everybody's safety was on your shoulders. We were very confident that you wouldn't just abandon everybody, because we started to get the measure of you and figure you out, and realized that you felt a sense of responsibility that not everybody would feel. Somebody else in your position would definitely have just bailed, but we could tell that you guys weren't like that. So maybe I'm not the expert on people, but I fucking had you figured out, and that's all I needed to have figured out. And I was like, ooh, Al, he is right on that one, I gotta say. I wanted so much to believe Al's whole, oh, you're too sloppy, you're too arrogant, and I don't even think he's entirely wrong. But Pride's rebuttal was compelling. That's all I'm saying. And mixed in with that conversation is Pride talking about the selflessness of some human beings, and the example that he gives is Wrath's wife. And he remembers a moment where they were in the city and somebody swerved. They lost control of their car and nearly hit him. And she threw herself over him to shield him from the car, even though he could definitely have protected himself. She didn't know that. And she was 100% willing to sacrifice her own life to save him. And Pride has this moment of just, I was just very moved, actually. I had never experienced anything like that before. I don't have a mother figure. And to see how completely willing she was about, I will just not live anymore if it means that it saves you. I had never really seen that kind of complete willingness to sacrifice, and it intrigued me a lot. And it made me feel like I actually had a mother in a way I never have. And I love the fact that he calls her Wrath's wife, so Al has to clarify who he means. And Al is like, well, if you like her, how could you just lie to her the way that you have been? I have to mention, as Al is asking these questions, Pride is just fucking around with Al's helmet, banging a stick on it, which just really it's clearly not bothering Al. He doesn't really even mention it, but it just felt like such a casual, shitty thing to do. I just found this very funny. And Pride is like, look, I won't lie, we were using her, and it's not like that wasn't what was happening. But I actually enjoyed the time that I spent with her. It was very pleasant. And I have discovered that there are people out there like her, like you guys, and you're willing to put it all on the line for shit you care about. And we figured out you were like that, and that you were never going to flee if you thought that you were putting everybody else in danger. So, and he says, in fact, you went so far as to bring the fight to us. So explain to me again, how were our plans sloppy? And Al does not have any response to that, because there isn't one, to be perfectly honest. So then we go to Roy, and he is at the cemetery with Hawkeye. It's a kind of weird moment, because the last time that we saw him, he was taking Wrath's wife hostage. And I guess they just stop at a cemetery in the midst of that. But it was a really weird moment. He's paying his respects to Hughes, which I guess I understand in light of the fact that they may all die tomorrow, that he's trying to be like, hey, buddy, you sacrificed so that we could figure out what was going on. And we have figured it out, and we are about to manage this shit. And this is in memory of you. But it just felt really weird to go from him, like, picking her up off the road, basically, like, cornering her, to then suddenly just standing alone in a graveyard. I was like, is this the time for this, sir? Maybe you wanted to do this before you met up with all of your friends in the tunnel and made them promise not to die. Maybe that was more the time. But nevertheless, we go back to Dr. Marco and Darius and all of them, and this is when they meet up with Zappano, I think is the name of the other guy. And this is really fun because all of them had been working for Kimberly. So they have a moment of just like not believing one another when they each say that they've defected and they're not working for him anymore, which made a lot of sense to me. I mean, they each think when they're saying, oh no, I don't work for him anymore, that they're trying to be tricked into admitting that they're traitors, you know? And it's really funny because Marco and Scar are just standing watching this. Like, they could vouch for these dudes, but they don't do that. They just stand and watch, and Marco almost has like an affectionate look on his face, like, these guys. And I found that really funny. So this is when Ed comes running up, and he says, I hate to spring this on you right away, but we need to get, and all of a sudden has to duck because these guys fighting, they like chucked an entire log. And the next scene, all of them are sitting down around a fire and talking about the situation with dumping Kimberly and the fact that they were completely expendable to him. None of them regrets leaving his service, and that they are very confident Ed and Al and the rest have their backs. They don't, they don't feel disposable to these guys. So it is kind of a cute moment. It was just weird because the attitude that Ed had for a minute of just like, hey, I hate to spring this on you right now. I thought he was going to be like, we really need to get moving. And then we cut to all of them just sitting still around a fire. And it felt like the urgency was undercut a little bit. I was like, oh, wait, what's going on? But they needed to have a meeting, and they send off Fu to do some recon in Central. He is the only one out of them that people aren't going to recognize. So he can infiltrate the city and find out information about what's going on a lot more easily. And he can report back to them on what Colonel Mustang is doing. And Ed says, I'm kind of getting the feeling that he's the most concerned about Ling. And I'm like, I mean, Ed, of course he is. That's entirely his job. It just was a moment of him being like, I'm really sensing some subtext here. I'm like, that's not subtext, buddy. That's just the actual text. But yeah, he turns to Scar and says, we have figured out our strategy. It's almost time. And then we get him picking up his red alchemy jacket and putting it on, and and honestly, it was pretty good. I really did like it. The opening song, while none of them have been as good as the first one, I like it better. I've gotten used to it, but I just miss the original one a whole lot. I just really do. Also, just as somebody who likes consistency in things that I consume for entertainment because of comfort reasons, it really bothers me how anime changes up the theme song so much. I feel like if I were a huge anime fan, that would be a consistent problem for me. And that's just evidently like how it works, but not for me, man. I don't like it. So he stands and watches the sun come up, says the promised day has begun. We start our credits, and then we have like this mid-credit sequence of this kid getting woken up, this guy named Brosh. Have we met Brosh before? Because I don't remember this guy. And I felt like I was dropped into this and I couldn't. I kept trying to be like, do I know him? And I don't feel like I do. I felt like I was missing something here. Because it's just a weird thing that I don't feel like the show has done. They've dropped us in with characters we don't know super well, but only for a very short moment. And this is a longer scene than we have had before. But he is being woken up by his, I think, little brother and sister, or they're his kids. They seem like brother and sister, though. I might be off on this. And they're talking about the solar eclipse and how he's missing it. They're acting like it's Christmas morning, doing that thing where at 5:30 a.m. kids jump on their parents' beds. Let's see. Oh, Damien says it's usually a contract thing. A lot of them have contracts with music companies. Huh. Okay. We'll get contracts for the same song the whole time. How about that? B. Moore says, yes, he was Maria Ross's partner, the one who guarded Ed and Al and Roy incinerated. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. I'm getting it. Okay. Thank you, B. Moore. God, that's like, I wish that they had given us a little something to remind us, because I am watching these so close together and I still didn't remember that. I feel like, I wonder how many other people realized who he actually was while they were watching this the first time. But, so he is telling these kids, like, don't look directly at the fucking sun. You're going to damage your eyesight. And the kid is like, am I an idiot? Is that what you think of me? That I'm a fucking moron? And honestly, this kid's so aggro, and I was entirely here for it. He's just like, wow, yeah, don't look at the sun. What am I, a fucking asshole to you? He was so mad. Oh my God. So anyway, he's got his telescope and he's looking outside and he's like, yo, there's something on fire. And Brosh goes and looks and you can see this stream coming up and like explosions and the fire, the smoke just increases. And he's like, okay, guys, I need you to stay in the house all day. Please do not come outside at all. And then we cut to Roy, who has just finished taking, it's like he is dealing with some soldiers in the street and he takes their car and just blows it up. I'm not entirely sure what he's trying to accomplish here, because he doesn't kill any of them. He doesn't take any of them prisoner, and he doesn't like give them a message to carry. So I don't really know why he's just blowing up a car and not actually directing an attack toward them. Well, somebody describes it as being engaged in combat, and I'm like, are they? Because it doesn't seem like he's trying to get in a fight. It seems like he's just trying to drive them away. And we cut to somebody reporting to one of the majors or generals, and he's saying, because they have the Fuhrer's wife as a hostage, we can't combat them. And the general is like, yeah, we can. The Fuhrer's wife? Are you high? We don't need her. The only one we need is Roy Mustang. Kill everybody else and get Roy Mustang. I can't believe I even have to explain this. Oh my God. He really just genuinely is like, guy, get it together. Eliminate her along with Mustang's subordinates. And then we cut to Mustang and all of them entering an abandoned building where they're clearly planning to hole up for a little while. And all of these soldiers come through the windows like it's fucking SWAT, through the doors, have them completely surrounded. And they have their weapons drawn. And Roy puts his hands up and then looks at Wrath's wife and is like, are you guys going to shoot? And they all hesitate. None of them is happy with the situation at all. One of them says, the only one we need is Roy Mustang, kill the rest. And she hears him say that. So she is aware, and I can only imagine she thinks the Fuhrer gave this directive. And maybe she doesn't think that, but if I were in her shoes, not knowing that he had been taken down unless she does know about the train thing. I don't know how fast that has circulated and how much she knows, because the military clearly doesn't give a shit about her, and I wouldn't be surprised if they know all kinds of stuff and they're just not communicating it to her because she doesn't need to know. But if she doesn't know that the Fuhrer is kind of out of play at the moment, she might think that he's behind this, and that's such a fucked up thing to believe. And then we get a close-up of one of their fingers on a trigger, and we hear a gunshot. And then we hear a couple more, but the camera by then is outside the building, so we don't actually see anybody get shot. So I'm going to go ahead and assume because I'm not thinking they're all getting fucking slaughtered. I just don't think that's going to happen. Either a bullet gets deflected somehow, or they aren't actually shooting in the direction we think they're shooting when they pull that trigger. Which would mean that somebody in their little group is a traitor. And if that's true, I'm very interested to know whether or not that's a recent development. Did they just decide this moment, I'm not going to kill this innocent fucking woman? No. Or were they planted from the beginning and got this all set up, and then they were like, haha, yeah, right, and just killed all the other dudes? Or maybe it's neither one of those. Don't know. But that is the end of the post-credits sequence. So that's where the episode ends. So yeah, this is a really fun one. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the fuck Promise Day is like. I really don't have any predictions for that at all. And considering everything moves so fast and it picks up directly when the last episode ended, it wouldn't be unreasonable for the next 10 to 13 episodes to all be on the same day, because they're only 20 minutes long. So who knows? All right. Well, guys, I am going to wrap up, but thank you guys so much for listening. Really, really appreciate you all. Thank you again to Max for commissioning this episode. And we will be seeing you very soon on Friday, in fact, with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.